Victor Thorn and Lisa Guliani just released the blockbuster book and video 9/11 on Trial. These brave, intrepid journalists have done what the Justice Department refused to do and Mike Rupert said couldn't be done. They've laid out an enactment of a trial to determine exactly what occurred on 9/11 and who were the likely culprits. Erskine overnight will give Victor and Lisa the opportunity to present the story that Art Bell refused to allow to be heard. Bell referred to these journalists as wingnuts. This is from the man who presents Chupacabra, Tales of Extraterrestrial Craft, Linda Moultoncow, Mr. Hoaxland, give me a break, and Tales of Extraterrestrial Craft following Hale-Bopp Comet, which was considered an omen for the sect to commit suicide in California. Listen and see if these wingnuts aren't tightening the screws on the lies and deception surrounding the 9/11 events. You've got to go to their website, www.wingtv.net. Lots of valuable information up there. Welcome, Victor. Welcome, Lisa.
It's great to be here, Erskine. What a wonderful intro.
Hi, Erskine.
Hi, Lisa. Now, here's what it is. A lot of people are looking at you and saying, what are you, a bunch of traitors? Here you are questioning what the government says. Well, one thing, there were a lot of people who questioned the government on a coup d'etat called the Kennedy assassination. The government line was Lee Harvey Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald. Even the congressional hearings later proved that that was a lie. They lied about the killing of our president. Who's to say what they're doing now? What has occurred since 9/11? We've lost our Constitution. We have invaded 2 countries looking for Osama bin Laden. We have become the #1 debtor nation in the world. We've had inflation going through the roof. I mean, the whole world has turned upside down for America and Americans since 9/11, has it not?
Well, everything, quoting John Kaminsky, who's another great 9/11 author, 9/11 is like the ground zero. Everything is spreading out from there right now, and all of those examples you gave and many more are exactly correct.
And I'd add to that Thomas Jefferson said that dissent is the highest form of patriotism.
He also said that the government ought to be overthrown every few years just to keep them honest. But we're looking at, reading a magazine I got off the shelf, and I wanted to find out about my lawn tractor, if I got a decent one. And they had a real good article about lawn tractor face-offs. And then I was reading about Jay Leno, had the biggest pickup truck going. And then I'm looking at this, Popular Mechanics 9/11 Lies. What the heck is Popular Mechanics getting into the 9/11 issue for? I mean, this is a magazine that you buy to find out what the best lawn tractor is, to find out about mechanical stuff. Why are they in this 9/11 issue?
Well, you know what's funny about that is that the American Free Press in their last issue had a big article about this, the behind-the-scenes of Popular Mechanics, and it seems there was a big turnaround there in the weeks and months preceding this issue, and many people that were there veterans, 10, 20 years, were all of a sudden tossed by the wayside and replaced by some of these new writers, these expert writers, like Mr. Chertoff and Ben Meigs and so forth. So it looks like this is a new regime that's been installed at Popular Mechanics, and if this is the best they can do, let's go back to the old one.
And let's remember that they're controlled by Hearst Corporation, better known for lying us into previous wars and for sensationalistic yellow journalism.
Well, you just look at the movie that Orson Welles did. That's about William Randolph Hearst.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a history of doing that, starting wars, being behind wars, and going with wars. All you have to do is look at Citizen Kane. Now, 9/11, debunking the myths. There are a couple of things that they bring up here. And I'm looking down, and one of the things that they say is there was no stand-down order. I've talked to Will Thomas. He's done a yeoman's job on this. He has the tape. He has the documentation from NORAD. There was a stand-down order. These people are lying. All they got to do is the least little bit of work. It's there.
Yeah, anyone that looks at even the simplest of timelines on 9/11 realizes that from the first instant that they realized that there was a hijacking until the final event took place at the Pentagon, there was about an hour and 40 minutes, an hour and 42 minutes that went by, yet there were 63 other opportunities prior to 9/11 when jet fighters were instantly, within minutes, set up to intercept or whatever to planes that had flown off a course, or in a rare instance actual hijackings. But they're tried and true. This is standard protocol for many, many years. But on 9/11, just like so many other things that happened that day, it coincidentally or conveniently fell apart.
Let's look at this coincidentally or conveniently. You've got Osama bin Laden sitting outside his cave banging rocks together, saying, hey, here's what we're going to plan. I'm going to take down the great Satan. I'm taking America down. How can this guy with a cell phone on dialysis put together such an amazing plan that everything worked just boom, boom, lickety-split and came down perfect? This guy from Afghanistan outside a cave. Excuse me, how did that occur?
Well, I have a book that preceded 9/11 on Trial. It's called 9/11 Exposed, and there's a short little chapter in it called Those Amazing 9/11 Cave Dwellers. And it goes into all these points, and it goes back to saying, how could these people living in a cave in Afghanistan, and when we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on defense and intelligence, blah, blah, and with nothing but box cutters, break everything down.
Right, and have you ever looked at a box cutter? They fall apart easily. They can barely open up a corrugated box.
Well, I was using a cutter to cut some drywall, and every now and then the blade would just fall out of the thing.
Yeah.
I'm not real good on that. It certainly isn't a major weapon, and neither are my wife's finger clippers that they confiscated this last trip that she took. And I'm looking at, she looked at the people and said, how can I turn that into a weapon? We can't talk about that. It's classified. Classified information on fingernail clippers. The other thing that I'm looking at is when you're talking about the 9/11 and you're talking about Osama bin Laden, he was in July at the American, get that word, American hospital in Dubai, United Arab Emirates in July, where he was met by the station chief. This is according to UPI. It's according to Paris newspapers. And he was met by the station chief. He was undergoing treatment for dialysis. Here's a guy dragging a dialysis machine with him, and we can't find him. What's going on? We invade two countries, and he's still walking around. What's going on?
Right. They even know the name of the agent that met him in this hospital. They know that his family also visited him. He's supposed to be the black sheep of the family. He's supposed to have
been. That's July before September. They had American agents met with Osama bin Laden in an American hospital where he was being treated. The American people don't know this.
No.
There are so many of these examples that just keep going on and on and on. And what the mainstream media isn't doing for us is connecting these dots. Of course, that's deliberate, because once we start connecting these dots like we're doing right now, the picture starts to become very clear. And they don't like a clear picture. They want us to remain in the fog.
The mainstream media enjoys a symbiotic relationship with the government.
Now, let me ask you a question. This Ben Chardoff, is he related to Chardoff, who's head of the Homeland Security now?
Yes, he is. And Christopher Bolin from the American Free Press actually called up this gentleman's mother and said, is this guy related to you? And she said, and she laughed. She said, well, of course he is. And then when they asked him about it on the Art Bell show,
he didn't know.
Yeah, he played dumb and says he didn't know, but his mother sure seems to know.
Didn't know who his mother was, or didn't know the fact that he and his brother are both citizens of Israel and the United States. We'll be back with more information from Victor Thorn and Lisa Guliani. Our number, 800-259-9231.
Erskine has gone to see a man about a mule, but he'll be right back.
Here at the retirement home, we always listen to Erskine overnight. It's all we got to listen to.
One of the issues that is brought out in popular mechanics is the collapse of World Trade Center Building number 7. Now, Larry Silverstein's the building manager, and he said, and this is on tape, it's on video, he said the order was given to pull it. When you say pull it, that means to set off detonations and bring it down. When I was substitute hosting for Alex Jones, we had people after people after people that Alex was interviewing on his great radio show on the street in New York during the Republican convention, and one after another of these New Yorkers said, we heard explosions. We heard explosions. This building was demolished professionally. All of these buildings were demolished professionally. Your comments on that?
Well, you're exactly correct. And what we do in our book, 9/11 on Trial, I hope everyone out there listening right now doesn't take lightly, because once we realize that this was a controlled demolition, everything about 9/11 and everything that results from that day takes on an entirely different light, and this is very, very important to all of us.
And what's important to note is that Silverstein tried to deflect the responsibility for that demolition onto the New York City Fire Department. And you have to ask yourself, when was that building wired? It certainly wasn't wired on 9/11.
Right. There are only a few companies in the entire world that are even capable of doing something like this. And when he deflects it onto the New York City Fire Department, he's insinuating that this is something that can be done in a few minutes, when it takes days, if not weeks, not only to implement a controlled demolition, but all the planning involved also. This isn't something that can be done in the snap of a finger, yet that's what he wants people to believe, that
right.
They just said, let's go pull this building, and shazam, it came down then.
And that wouldn't have been the place of the fire department to authorize the pulling of that building.
Exactly.
Now, let's look at something else that occurred. When you're talking about the buildings coming down, you're talking about everything occurring. People have seen the demolitions. Who was in control of the building as far? Who would have had access? I understand the Carlyle Group certainly did.
Well, there's a man named Marvin Bush who coincidentally seems to be George Bush's brother, and he was in charge of security that day, not only at the towers at that complex, but also at the airports that were involved in the quote-unquote hijackings. So they keep this in the family right there. And also, in my book that I mentioned previously, 9/11 Exposed, there's a gentleman named Scott Forbes who's now living in England, and I interviewed him, and he was working for Fiduciary Trust. And he said that the weekend prior to the World Trade Center collapse, that there was these huge power downs at the towers where all kinds of different individuals were coming and going out of the towers, that the normal security procedures were lax, that the cameras were off, and on and on and on. So there's a lot of very intriguing events taking place.
Yeah, this gentleman was actually called into work that weekend to disable the computer systems for his company, and he said that crewmen or different men were roaming through the buildings with free access. The electronic locks were not working. Security cameras were off, and they were able to go anywhere in those towers they wanted to.
Let's go look at another Bush. Where was George Herbert W. Bush?
Reading a book upside down.
The former president. Wasn't he meeting with a group including Osama bin Laden's brother?
Uh-huh.
Right. He was at the Carlisle meeting that day, and, I hate to keep using the word, but there's so many coincidences that after a while you have to start scratching your head and saying, how do all these things start coming together?
Wouldn't any police investigator, if you've named Osama bin Laden, wouldn't they, A, keep the bin Ladens in this country, B, examine anybody who's talking with a bin Laden, and C, put the clamps on so tight that these people couldn't move?
Apparently not.
Yeah, instead we whisked them all out of the country without question.
And the American people just sit back and say, you're a bunch of wingnuts?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you bring that word up, because it's kind of been introduced into our lexicon now, and Art Bell, that's the word he kept using and throwing around that night when he had Mr. Chertoff on, and it was in direct reference to Wing TV. And the thing we have to know about Art Bell, what he did that night, was it's the exact same techniques that our government and other disinformation specialists use. First of all, they marginalize this type of research by calling us wingnuts or conspiracy theories. But the second thing is even more dangerous, is that a day or so afterward, he released a letter to his listeners and said that he's not going to join the America Haters Club like the 9/11 researchers were. And this is the exact same thing that the government does, is if you question them, then you hate America. So Art Bell is using the same techniques that the disinformation specialists use.
But what he's doing is letting us know, and Chertoff even admitted this, that this information is getting into the mainstream, and that's why they even addressed it in the first place. And I want to say, too, we don't honor the dead through our silence. We honor the dead by speaking out and seeking justice for them.
And you're not only talking about the dead, but you're talking about the living.
That's right.
Who are undergoing the lack of a constitution, the living who are being killed, 4 more killed in Afghanistan. And on the news report, they said 4 Americans killed in Afghanistan. The Taliban said that they had placed the mine in the road, but their reports are unreliable. Well, I'm looking at this and I'm saying 4 dead. Does it matter if it's reliable or not? You've got 4 dead. They're saying they put the bomb there. Is there a question in anybody's mind? Maybe it's put there by an American who just happened to put it in the wrong place. Give me a break. These people are taking the news, twisting it.
Yep.
Now, you're looking at the Art Bell program. It's owned by Premier Radio. Premier Radio is owned by Clear Channel.